السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. Dear brothers and sisters, it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be sitting in this virtual gathering of dhikr, even though we're not able to sit physically in person, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at least has given us the means to be sitting virtually, and we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants the reward of the same reward that we would have gotten had we been in this gathering physically. And we know the rewards of these gatherings are many. From amongst them, in a hadith it is mentioned that these gatherings are like the gardens of paradise. And another hadith it is mentioned that لا يقعد قوم يذكرون الله إلا حفتهم الملائكة وغشيتهم الرحمة ونزلت عليهم السكينة وذكرهم الله في من عنده. That a group of people don't sit remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except that the angels surround this gathering, and that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surrounds this gathering, and sakina, peace and tranquility descends upon this gathering. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best of all, is that He Himself remembers these people. He mentions these people in front of the angels, those who are with Him. So we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants us the same reward for sitting in this gathering virtually. Moving forward, Mufti Ali-Muddin had asked me to speak today. He had mentioned that we are going daily over Imam Muhasibi's Risalat al-Mustarshidin. So he told me to choose any section that I feel that is beneficial to speak about, and to speak about that. So I want to choose a section which speaks about ar-rida bil-qada, being pleased with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined, particularly because it is very relevant to us in our situation today, as we all know that we are all in the midst of a pandemic that none of us, even our parents, even our elders, our grandparents, they probably haven't seen anything like this, where literally the entire world is in shock and in fear, and everybody's going through hardships. And this is something which nobody is free from. Nobody is an exception to this rule. Every single person is in some sort of hardship. You know, from some people, they may be in physical hardship where they have actually caught the coronavirus, and maybe their family members have caught the coronavirus and they've actually passed away due to it, or they're in severe pain and severe hardship physically due to it, or maybe financial reasons. You know, many people have lost their jobs, and many people their pay has been cut, and people are struggling to survive. They're even struggling to get basic necessities. So financially, many people have been affected. Pretty much everybody's been affected. There's pretty much a recession going on right now. And even in terms of being separated from family, many of us can't even visit our own relatives right now, and it especially hurts because Eid is coming up, and this was always a time when we could always meet relatives that we don't see throughout the year. And now we most likely won't be able to do that as well. And so people are separated from their families. Over here where I am in Darul Uloom Zakaria in South Africa, there are literally hundreds of students who are not able to go home and meet their families. So they're all away from home. So they're also going through this hardship as well. So the hardships that everybody's going through, you know, maybe events were canceled as well, weddings were canceled as well, when weddings were delayed. So every single person is going through some sort of hardship, some sort of change in their life. So something which is extremely important for us to speak about and to think about is how can we be pleased with Allah subhanahu with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined? Because if we don't really ponder about this concept, if we don't really focus on this concept, then this might become everything might become so overwhelming, and that's why we see that the cases of depression are rising, the cases of suicide are rising, because unfortunately we haven't truly taught ourselves this concept of being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is destined. So that is why I chose a small section from this book that speaks about this topic. So Imam al-Hasibi says, وَاسْتَعْمِلْ لِلَّهِ عَقْلَكْ بِتَرْكِ التَّدْبِيرِ وَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ عَلَى صَرْفِ الْمَقَادِيرِ. And I translated this a little loosely. So I'll just read the translation. Use your brain for Allah's sake by not relying on it totally. Meaning don't completely rely on your brain. And that in reality is using your brain to its fullest degree. When you realize that you can't rely fully on your brain because at times your intellect can be incorrect because our brains are limited. Then the second part, and seek Allah's help for overcoming the abrupt, volatile changes written in your destiny. In simple words, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help for all the hardships that you come across that have been written for you, that have been written in your destiny. So the first phrase tells us that it is actually from the highest levels of intellect to understand that that our knowledge and intellect is limited. Imam Muhasibi rahimahullah is encouraging us to be pleased with whatever outcome Allah has written for us. And perhaps the Imam is referring to the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. This is an ayah that many of us have probably heard. We hear very often, but it's something that we really have to build yaqeen in from the bottom of our hearts. And this is one of the hardest things to do. The meaning of the ayah is that it may be that you dislike something while it is good for you. And it may be that you love something while it is bad for you. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows while you do not know. So this is what Imam Muhasibi is referring to when he's saying that use your brain by not relying on it totally. Meaning whenever we come across, go through some sort of hardship, if we just use our brains and if we always try to think, oh, what's the outcome of this going to be? What's going to happen after this? Then eventually it'll lead us to failure and it'll lead us to depression. It'll lead us to hardship. But if we really focus on this aspect of rida bil qada and being pleased with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for us, then this will really soften the load and soften the blow of qadr, soften the blows of all these hardships that are coming upon us. And something interesting which happened recently here, Mufti al-Haq hafidhahullah, he is the teacher of our teachers, Mufti Alim's teacher, and pretty much most of the teachers in Dar es Salaam, he is their teacher. And he's one of the greatest shuyukh here in South Africa. So recently, he was trying to go to Pakistan as he goes every summer where his family stays. And he was very excited to go home to see his family. But then what happened is he went to the airport and they told him only when he reached the airport that his flight was canceled. So he came back to Darul Zakaria, and to a small group of people, he gave a short talk. He gave a talk about the importance of rida bil qada, which is our topic for today. And it was a very beautiful talk, and he gave many examples of different situations where there was a positive outcome out of a seemingly negative event. So Mufti Sahib was obviously referring to his own self, consoling his own self, as well as he was extremely excited to go home to his homeland, Pakistan, where his wife is, where his children are. There's literally none of his relatives except one of his relatives here. So he was extremely excited to go home, and he wasn't able to go home. So Mufti Sahib, he mentioned many examples from history in which a positive outcome came out of a seemingly negative event. So inshallah, I'm going to go very briefly through some of them. There's not enough time to go into detail for each one of them. So the first is a story of Hajar alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. And I'm sure most of us are acquainted with this story. Is when Ibrahim alayhi salam was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take his wife Hajar and Ismail alayhi salam, and of course this is after so long of wanting a son. And after all this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him by telling him to take his wife and his son and to take him in the valley of Bakka and to leave them there. And so what was Hajar alayhi salam's response is very famous, that إِذًا لَا يُضَيِّرُنَا. She asked him first, Ibrahim alayhi salam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to do this. And Ibrahim alayhi salam said yes. And then she said, إِذًا لَا يُضَيِّرُنَا. Then he will not let us go to waste. He will not let us perish. So this was Hajar alayhi salam's iman. And this was her rida bil qada. This was her being pleased with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. So what good came out of this? We see that we know the whole story of Zamzam and how from this event Zamzam came about, and also then after Zamzam, then slowly people started settling there, the tribe of Jurhum, and then slowly this same valley became Makkah, and that same valley is where they built the Kaaba, and that same valley is where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came so many centuries later. So much khair, so much good came out of this event, which seemed extremely negative in the beginning, but because of Hajar alayhi salam's sabr, and because of her being pleased and being content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, you see how much good and how much khair came out of it. Then going quickly through the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, we see that Yusuf alayhi salam, in the beginning of the story, we saw that his brothers were jealous of him, and what happened? They threw him into a well. So Yusuf alayhi salam was steadfast, and he had patience. And we see that there are so many events that happen in the story. There's no time to go into it. But after everything that happened, Allah describes in detail the whole process, and that helps us appreciate more how it is all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. And Allah continuously throughout the surah, He highlights that this is all the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the end, what ends up happening? Yusuf goes from being a little boy stuck in the bottom of a well to being literally a ruler over Egypt. And all of his brothers, they became from being extremely jealous of him to actually prostrating to him out of respect and reverence for him. So we see all of this khair came out of what? Because this all came out of a seemingly negative event. Of course, what can seem more negative than that? A little boy who can't even fend himself off from his brothers. He's stuck at the bottom of a well. It seems like there can't get any more negative than that. We see all the khair that came out of it. That shows the hikmah behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's destiny. Then we see the story of Maryam alayhi salam. We see that her mother, the wife of Imran, she said that inni nadartu laka ma fi batni muharraran. She had promised that she wanted her son that was going to be born when she was pregnant. She had promised that it would be a khadim of Masjid al-Aqsa. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had different plans. A daughter was born instead of a son. But you see that this seeming negative event, because she wanted specifically that the son could do khidmah for the masjid. This turned out to be very positive, because Maryam alayhi salam was one of the best women, and not just women, but the best people, the best awliya in the history of mankind. And we see that Maryam alayhi salam, she gave birth to such a great prophet, one of the greatest prophets, Isa alayhi salam. So a seemingly negative event again turned into something extremely positive. Then the story of Hudaybiyah. This is a very detailed story, but long story short, the Prophet ﷺ set out with a bunch of Muslims to do Umrah, and they were stopped, they were prevented, and the Muslims were ready to fight because they seemed that they had a lot more power at that point. And especially Umar radiallahu anhu is really pushing for this. But the Prophet ﷺ, he saw differently, and he said that, okay, let's just settle with a truce for a truce with the disbelievers of Mecca. So they settled for a truce, and it seemed like many of the conditions of the truce were against the Muslims, and Umar radiallahu anhu and many of the other Sahaba were very displeased with the conditions of the truce. It was very one-sided. It seemed like it was very beneficial for the disbelievers, whereas it was disadvantageous for the Muslims. So they were very annoyed, and they didn't feel that was the best outcome to come out. But in the end, they submitted, and they said, Allahu Rasul Alam, Allah and His Rasul know best. And especially Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, this showed his virtue on that day, because he didn't he completely was with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the entire time. So in that story, then what ended up happening is that truce actually had a condition which helped the Muslims gain many more followers, and it opened the door for da'wah, and there was no more worry for of the disbelievers attacking them. So that opened the gate of da'wah, and we see so many tribes became Muslim, and that eventually led to the Fath of Mecca. That led to the conquest of Mecca, and Allah actually told them, Nabi Sallallahu about the conquest of Mecca right when the treaty happened. And Umar actually said, "Is this a conquest? How could this be a conquest? This treaty, which is so one-sided and so against us, how could this be a conquest?" But we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made such a positive outcome come out of a seemingly negative event. Then we see Umar radiallahu anhu Islam. We see that he was actually going to kill the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And yet this, I mean, what could be a more negative event than that? It's literally the worst possible sin that a person can do. One of the worst possible sins a person can do is kill the not any Prophet of Allah, but Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best Prophet ever to step foot on the face of the earth. Yet the outcome of that story, of that event, is that he ended up becoming Muslim. We know we might know the story. It's a little detailed. We won't go detail into it, but the end result of the story is that he became Muslim. And not only did he didn't just become any Joe Schmo Muslim, he literally became the second best Muslim after the prophets. He became he's second only to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So this came, and we know how much khair came in the Khilafah in the Caliphate of Umar radiallahu anhu after Abu Bakr the Muslims conquered so many lands, and they reached great heights, even in terms of worldly standards. So that all of that khair came out of an extremely negative event, which was he was setting out to kill Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then the story of the day of Wishah. This is actually mentioned in a hadith in Bukhari. It's a little detailed. I'm just going to give a gist of the story. Aisha radiallahu anha said that there was a woman who used to always sing about. She used to say, وَيَوْمَ الْوِشَاحِ مِنْ تَعَاجِيمِ رَبِّنَا أَلَا إِنَّهُ مِنْ بَدَةِ الْكُفْرِ أَنْجَانِ. That the day of Wishah is from the amazing things, amazing matters of my Lord, and it definitely saved me from the land of disbelief, the land of kufr. So then one day she asked this woman about this story. So long story short, the people of that area, one time there was a little girl who had a belt. It had some jewelry in that belt. So one day a bird came and took that belt and literally took it out of the hand of that little girl. So then the people accused this woman. I believe she was a slave woman. They accused this woman of stealing that belt, but then no matter what she told them, they were not believing. They accused her. Then out of nowhere, the bird came and gave the thing back. So then it became clear that she was innocent from what they were saying, but she was so angry and frustrated that she literally just left, and she ended up traveling to Medina. And once she reached Medina, she accepted Islam. So imagine such an amazing event, such a seemingly negative event, that they literally blamed her for stealing something that she never stole. That event ended up being the reason for her accepting Islam and being saved from the hellfire and being entered into Jannah. So again, extremely positive outcome coming out of a seemingly negative event. And we see the story of Salman al-Farsi, radiyallahu anhu. It's a long story, very long story, and definitely worth reading. I would definitely recommend all of us read the story. So the story of Salman al-Farsi, radiyallahu anhu. In this story, he was searching for the truth. And then while he was searching for truth, he had heard about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was looking for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for such a long time. And then what ended up happening is that he was captured. His caravan, I believe, was attacked, and then he was captured and he was enslaved. So now imagine he is enslaved in Arabia. So that's obviously an extremely negative event. But he ended up being taken to Medina, and that is where he saw Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the whole story is there. And he ended up after a few days, after looking for the signs in Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the signs of prophethood, he ended up becoming Muslim. And not only did he become Muslim, but he became one of the great Muslims to such an extent that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Salman minna. Salman is from us. That he is from the Ahlul Bayt of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he was known as Salman ibn al-Islam, Salman the son of Islam. And he was one of the greatest Sahaba radiallahu anhu. And we all know the story of Khandaq, his contributions in the story of Khandaq as well. So those are just some examples. Mutsab mentioned some others examples as well. But these are many amazing examples and stories that we can ponder about so that we can see that history has many examples of where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings an extremely positive outcome out of a seemingly negative event. So in our situation as well, I'm sure if we really think and ponder, we can come up with many positive outcomes out of this seemingly negative event that we're going through, this pandemic that we're going through. And this is actually what Islam teaches us. Islam in general teaches, it does not teach pessimism, it teaches optimism. So we see that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam actually prohibited us from taking bad omens, right? It's prohibited to look at something, for example, let's say if you want to do something and all of a sudden you see something that seems negative, so you're like, okay, I'm not going to do it because I saw this seemingly negative omen. That's actually prohibited. Whereas it is permissible and actually it is actually recommended to take good omens. So for example, if you're Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did this as well. During that same treaty of Hudaybiyah, a man named Suhail came to him and he was negotiating with him the terms of the treaty. So as soon as this man came, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Sahul al-amr, our matters become easy, because the word Suhail comes from Sahl. Sahl means easy. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw that person is coming, so he took it to be a good omen. He took it in a positive light. And he said that means our matter is about to become easy. So you see that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is teaching us positivity. Even the Quran, you see, is teaching us to be positive. And we'll look at some ayat, inshallah, that teach us positivity as well. And we look at we look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, for example. Not going to go into all the details, but he was asked about the interpretation of a dream. And that interpretation was actually negative. The interpretation of the dream is that there was going to be a big drought for many years, for 7 years. And it was possible that many people could die from that drought. But instead of making it extremely negative and telling them that, this is going to happen and you better be very scared, this and that, he only told them the solution. He told them that first you harvest for 7 years, and then after that you save something every single year so that you have something left over for the year that you're going to have so you can save enough food for the years that you're going to be in drought. So he didn't make them extremely scared and say that, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Rather, it was extremely positive. He just told them the solution rather than telling them the problem. So Islam in general teaches us positivity and optimism and frowns upon pessimism. And so that's the outlook that we should have on this pandemic as well. We should always look at the silver lining and look at the positive aspects of the pandemic. And I can name a few right now. For example, over here in Dar al Zakaria, I mentioned that there are many students that were left behind. And of course, we can't have big gatherings. So we see that in this compound itself, it's so beautiful. You go every different room, you'll see a different tarawih going on. And you go into one of the bigger rooms, you see every single corner of the room, in the middle of the room, you'll see different jama'at of tarawih going on. So one of the ulama mentioned today, he mentioned that probably about 30 khatams happened for tarawih. And I think I would actually count more than 30 khatams based on what I saw. And some people also did multiple khatams in tarawih as well. So look, and he said that all this khair, this many khatams, this many different tarawihs going on in one compound, imagine. All this khair came due to this pandemic. So that's one positive thing that came out of the pandemic. Then another great thing that has happened with the pandemic, many people, I have heard from multiple people that it has actually given them an opportunity to turn back to refocus and to turn back towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of my good friends told me that, he was getting caught up in college and he felt like he was getting away from Allah. But this pandemic was one of the greatest beneficial things for him, because he was he started to refocus, and he started doing more and more ibadah. And Mufti Adim posted an inspiring message from one of the students, former students of Dar es Salaam, who actually finished 2 khatams of the Quran in one day. And that is one of the barakat of this pandemic, because he said that even when I was in i'tikaf in Dar es Salaam before, I wasn't able to do it because I'm completely alone at home, and I wasn't able to. And you don't really have anything else to do. There's not even like bayans and things like that. So he was able to finish 2 khatams in one day. Imagine. And this is not something we're hearing from the past, from the people, the time of the Salaf, where we hear things like, for example, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he finished 60 khatams in 1 month. In the month of, he would finish 60 khatams in the month of Ramadan. And we think that's impossible. This is literally in our times. This is somebody who many of us probably know. So and there are many other positive stories that are coming out of a seemingly negative event as well. So it's all about what we make of it. And at the end of the day, the main thing that should console us is that it's not in our hands. See, the things that we should stress about, not exactly stress about, but we should learn from, is those things which are in our control. That's what we are going to be asked for. So if we make a mistake, for example, if something happens because of our mistake, let's say, for example, I get into a car accident because I'm on the phone and I'm checking my texts while I'm driving, then that's something that you should regret and you should feel bad over. And you should say that, okay, next time I should definitely watch myself and I should not text while driving. That's something we should learn from. And that's something you can be held accountable for. But whenever there's something that's outside of our control, because Allah has given us free will, but whenever there's something that's outside of our control, that's what happens many of the time. And that's basically everything that's happening with this pandemic. All of these things that I mentioned, the financial problems, the sicknesses, all being separated from families, etc. All of these things are things that are not in our control. They're in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if that's the case, then what is the point of worrying about it? What is the point of beating ourselves about it? What is the point of thinking, what if this happened? What if that happened? That is actually a trick of shaitan. The Prophet, as mentioned in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, فإن أصابك شيء فلا تقل لو أني فعلت كان كذا وكذا ولكن قل قدر الله وما شاء فعل فإن لو تفتح عمل الشيطان. If some matter, some hardship comes upon you, then don't say, if only I did such and such, then this would have happened. Rather say, قدر الله وما شاء فعل. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed, that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, and whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, He does. فَإِنَّ لَوْ تَفْتَحُ عَمَلَ الشَّيْطَانِ. Because saying if only I had done this, if only I had done that, if only this would have happened, this is actually a means of opening the door of shaitan. He starts playing with you. He starts making you negative towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to have positive mindset about Allah. We have to have husnul dhan billah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّي عَبْدِي بِي. I am as my slave thinks of me. So if we have this positive mindset when we have hardships and we realize that it's whatever is written for us is going to happen no matter what, then it'll really take care of so many of our problems, and it'll make our problems seem small to our eyes. That is why the hadith, the dua of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is mentioned, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he asked Allah that, oh Allah, grant me that yaqeen by which you make the problems of my problems seem small. وَمِنَ الْيَقِينِ مَا تُهَوِّنُ بِهِ عَلَيْنَا مَصَائِبَ الدُّنْيَا. So this shows us that when we have firm yaqeen that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed, that is definitely going to happen, no matter what I try. For example, and just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَيْنَمَا تَكُونُوا يُدْرِكُمُ الْمَوْتُ وَلَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُرُوجٍ مُشَيَّدَةٍ. That wherever you may be, death will definitely overtake you, even if you're in fortified castles. So no matter what you try, al-hadaru la yunji min al-qadar, no matter how much caution you take, that will not save you from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. So once we realize this fact that Allah has decreed it, so what is the point of me trying to run away from it? What is the point of me beating myself up over it? What is the point of me feeling sad about it? Just suck it up and keep going with it, and you will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put khair in it in the end. We have to have positive opinions about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, positive hopes in whatever He does for us, inshallah. And I just want to end off quickly with some ayat of the Quran, and specifically some points we can, 10 glad tidings that we can get from these ayat, and 10 means of comfort and solace for those who have patience whenever they go through any hardship. This is actually Mawlana Yusuf Ghoth, Hafidhahullah, our beloved teacher. He initially told us about this in Ibn Majah class. This is actually from the notes he got from Mufti Ridha al-Haq, the same teacher that I was speaking about earlier. So this is from his notes in tafsir. So the ayat, we'll just read the translation of these ayat. And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient, who when disaster strikes them, they say, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to him we will return. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Those are the ones upon whom are blessings from their Lord and mercy, and it is those who are the rightly guided. So this is a translation of the ayat. So we see that these ayat actually contain 10 glad tidings and means of comfort and solace for those who have patience. The first is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give glad tidings to the patients. So in reality, when this person goes through hardships, he should know that in reality, this is a means of glad tidings. Why? Because everything is good for a believer, right? The hadith says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ خَيْرٌ وَلَيْسَ ذَاكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. How amazing is the matter of a believer. Indeed, all of his matters are good for him. And that is not the case for anybody except a believer. In asabatu sarra shakara fakana khayran lahu. If any good happens to him, then he is thankful, and that is good for him. When asabatu dharra sabara fakana khayran lahu. And if any hardship afflicts him, then he has patience, and that is good for him. And obviously, the reward for patience is great. And trials and tribulations for believers, we have to know this. This is an important thing for us to know, is that the trials and tribulations for a believer, the more trials you have is actually a good sign, because the hadith says, أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاءُ ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلُ فَالْأَمْثَلُ, that the people who have the most hardships and trials are the prophets, and then those who are the best and the most pious after them. So the more pious you are, the more hardships you will actually go through. That's why you see Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he had the most hardships of anyone ever to walk on the face of the earth. He had the most hardships. He went through the most hardships. Uditu fillahi ma for sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Uditu fillahi wa lam yu'da ahad. Nabi sallallahu himself mentioned that he went through the most hardships for sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anyone else. But you see that the yaqeen that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had in Allah, if any one of us went through the same hardships Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through, first his parents passed away when he was very young, then his uncle passed, then his grandfather passed away, then he was raised by his uncle, and then all these people rejected him, and they even killed his daughter, and etc. So many different hardships that Nabi sallallahu went through. His uncle, who he loved so much, passed away at one of the hardest points of his life, and he didn't accept Islam, even though he helped Islam so much, etc. He went through so much hardship, and we could probably say that if any one of us went through those hardships, we would just break. But Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of his strength, because of his closeness to Allah, because of his iman, he not only prevailed, but he thrived. So anyways, going back to the point, Bashir. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to have rejoice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, give glad tidings to the people who have patience. So in reality, us going through a hardship is actually a means of glad tidings for us. And the next glad tiding that we can say is in these ayat is the word as-sabirin. So if you look at it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually used, he didn't say give glad tidings to the patient person. He didn't use the singular version. He didn't say that give glad tidings to the patient person. He said give glad tidings to the patient people. He used the plural form, sabirin. And that there's actually an indication that you're not the only one who's going through hardship. You're not the only one who's being tested. In reality, if you think about it, every single person that had ever walked on the face of the earth has been afflicted. Whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, this is something that's common amongst everybody. Every single person is going through hardships. And the thing is, once you know that you're not the only one going through hardships, that there are other people with you, then that makes things much easier. And that's just a general rule. That's why, like, whenever, for example, if somebody gets in trouble, they're always looking for somebody else who's also in trouble with them. Then that makes them feel less bad, right? It's a statement in Arabic, al-musibatu idha ammat khaffat. When the tribulation is more widespread, it becomes easier. So once you know that you're not the only one, you're not alone in your hardship, then that actually makes it's a means of solace for you. It's a means of comfort for you. And so that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word. That's one hikmah you can say why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the plural word in this ayah. Then the next one you can say, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ. So the word إِذَا is here is used. إِذَا means when. Allah didn't say if a hardship afflicts you. Allah said when a hardship afflicts you. So we all know, even in English, we have this difference that when you say if something is going to happen, then it's not certain it's going to happen. It's possible it may happen. But when you say إِذَا, when you say when, then you know it's for certain it's going to happen. Allah said when disaster strikes them, they say this. So that gives an indication that hardship is going to strike them no matter what. So once we know, as I mentioned earlier, the hadith mentions that أنما أصابه لم يكن ليخطئه وما أخطأه لم يكن ليصيبه. That every single thing has a reality, and the person will not reach the reality of iman until he realizes that whatever was going to afflict him will never miss him, and whatever is going to miss him will never afflict him. So if we know that it's definitely going to come no matter what, Allah has already written it, then when it comes, then we won't feel so bad, because we know problems and hardships will come in our life. So once we know that it definitely is coming no matter what, then it'll make us feel a little better. Then in the statement inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, there are a few things as well. So inna lillahi, we belong to Allah. The whole phrase inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un that we should say, in reality we should say this when all hardships come upon us, not as this ayah says, not just when people die. We always say it when people die, but it's not only for when people die, but it is in general whenever we go through any hardships. So we say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to him we will return. So when we say that we belong to Allah, there is an element of solace and comfort in that, because we belong to Allah. We literally belong to Allah, so Allah can literally do with us as he wants. And there's definitely a means of solace to that. I mean, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's owning us, and he is doing whatever he wants, but we know that Allah is going to do that which is best for us. Then ilayhi raji'un, it mentions that, and we are returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are going to return to Allah. So there's a huge means of solace for us, especially us as believers, because we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We spend our entire lives worshiping him. And so once we realize that there's going to be a time where we will leave all these hardships, we will leave this dunya, which is full of trials and tribulations and etc. And we are going to leave this dunya and we're going to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beloved, then that is a means of solace for us as well. Then the sixth thing we can say is the word return. We're the same thing, right? We said ilayhi raji'un, we're returning back to Allah. The word return is viewing, that gives the feeling of as if you're coming home after a long journey, right? We all know that feeling that you've been driving on the road for 12 hours, for example, a long road trip, and the only thing you want is just to return back home. So that is the feeling that we get when we say that we're returning back to Allah, that we're going back to him after such a long journey in this dunya. At the end, we're going to be home. We're going to be where we belong in Jannah. We are going to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seventh thing is these people who have patience, they will have salawat. And the ulama mentioned different interpretations. What we could say is just it's a special mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends for the people who have patience. Then Allah mentions also that they have rahmah, and it is general, which means that it's just a general mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants everybody. But the people who have patience will also have this mercy. Then we gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ, because those people who have hidayah obviously get closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not only do they get closeness to Allah, but they realize the reality of this dunya, and they realize its temporary nature. These are 10 points that we can keep in mind, inshallah, from these ayat. And we realize how deep the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And so if we think about all of these points that were mentioned from these ayat, and also the different stories that were mentioned, and we ponder about these things, and we realize that all the hardships that we're going through were written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyways, and we try to look for a silver lining that is coming out of all of it, then inshallah we will see that our lives will be much happier, and we will see that we'll be much more pleased with ourselves. We will be much more pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll have a much more positive outlook on life. We'll have much more energy and motivation to do more good. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all that yaqeen by which He makes our trials seem to be small. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. سبحان الله بحمده. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.